At 3 in the morning, I watched the president of my HOA crouch at the end of my driveway and rip open a box that wasn't hers. The moment the cardboard split, the world bloomed into chaos. A cloud of glitter detonated upward like a disco ball had died, coating her hair, face, and polyester tracksuit in neon sparkles. At the same time, the spoiled shrimp I had lovingly marinated in summer heat released an odor so foul that even my security camera microphone gagged. Karen, queen of the cul-de-sac and self-proclaimed guardian of our neighborhood's aesthetic values, stumbled back, retching, while looking around like the shadows might be harboring paparazzi. Through my blinds, I held back laughter so hard my ribs hurt. I'd finally caught her in the act. The funny thing was, this wasn't even revenge yet. This was step 1, confirmation. I had known for weeks that packages were disappearing from my porch, usually the day they arrived. At first I blamed the usual suspects: delivery drivers, opportunistic kids, maybe porch pirates from outside the subdivision. But then little details started adding up. Karen, who lived 3 houses down, always seemed to mention what I ordered before I had the chance to open it. Offhand comments like, "Oh, I see you're into wireless speakers now," or "I didn't know you wore size medium hoodies." That one had especially chilled me, because I had never worn one in public. I confronted her once in passing, testing the waters. I joked about a missing delivery, and her smile tightened like a stretched rubber band. "Well, if you didn't leave things lying around for days, maybe they wouldn't vanish," she said, before striding off like she had just delivered the Gettysburg Address. That's when I installed the cameras. Motion activated, night vision capable, 2 angles covering the porch and driveway. I didn't expect to catch anything so soon, but Karen had the subtlety of a marching band. The bait box had been a stroke of genius, if I do say so myself. Amazon box recycled, carefully taped, packed with expired shrimp from my freezer and 3 vials of ultra-fine glitter I bought online. Glitter is eternal. Once it touches you, it's part of your DNA. I stuffed it into a shoebox, sealed it with care, and left it under the porch light like an invitation. Then I waited. When Karen fell for it, she didn't just grab the box and leave. No, she cracked it open right there, like a raccoon unable to resist shiny trash. That detail told me everything. She wasn't stealing because she needed the items. She was stealing because she wanted to know. She wanted to control. Packages were secrets, and Karen hated secrets. After the glitter bomb went off, she bolted across the street to her car, gagging and pawing at her face. I almost felt bad. Almost. The camera footage was perfect. I saved 3 copies before I even went to bed. The next morning, the neighborhood buzz was electric. Karen appeared at the HOA office, our neighborhood's community clubhouse, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf that failed to hide the rainbow sheen embedded in her hairline. People whispered. She held a hastily scheduled emergency meeting that afternoon, inviting only board members. By evening, an email arrived in my inbox with the subject line, "Important new security policy." The message was peak Karen. It declared that all packages delivered to the neighborhood must now be rerouted to the HOA office for safekeeping. Residents could pick them up after hours by appointment, provided they paid a small, administrative fee for storage. According to her, this measure was necessary due to recent porch theft incidents. My jaw nearly hit the floor. The thief was now proposing a tax on her own crimes. I showed the email to my neighbor Chris, a laid-back guy who mostly cared about mowing his lawn in diagonal stripe. He whistled. "She's got guts, I'll give her that. You gonna let her get away with it?" "Not a chance," I said. But my tone was casual. Always casual. Never let Karen know you're rattled. That night, I reviewed the footage again. The glitter sparkled under the security light, an undeniable halo of guilt around her. I debated posting it to the community Facebook group, but that would be too easy. Too fast. Karen thrived on drama, and she was already rehearsing her victim's speech. No, I needed patience. I needed escalation. The next twist came sooner than I expected. At 7 the next morning, a police cruiser rolled into the cul-de-sac and parked right in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out and Karen trailed behind them, glitter still visible in the roots of her hair. She looked like she'd lost a fight with a kindergarten craft project. The officers knocked on my door. When I opened it, Karen's smirk told me everything. She had filed a complaint. "Sir," one officer began, "we've received a report that you may have placed hazardous materials in a package that caused harm to a resident." I stared at him. My brain cartwheeled between outrage and laughter. Hazardous materials? She had opened a stolen box. The shrimp wasn't dangerous, it was just disgusting. Glitter wasn't toxic unless inhaled in industrial amount. Karen stepped forward, clutching her scarf dramatically. "He's weaponizing mail, officer. It could have blinded me. It could have poisoned me. This community deserves to feel safe." The officer sighed, clearly already regretting his career choices. "We just need to ask you a few questions." I invited them inside, calmly, politely. I offered coffee. I played the footage on my TV, watching their eyes widen as Karen ripped open the box that was very clearly labeled with my name and address. Glitter geyser. Shrimp tsunami. Her panicked retreat. The silence afterward was golden. Karen's face turned the shade of an overripe tomato. "That video is doctored. It's fake. He knows tech stuff." The second officer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, it looks pretty real to me." They left soon after, politely advising me not to set traps that could be misconstrued as harmful. Karen, humiliated, stormed down my walkway, muttering threats under her breath. By the end of the week, though, the real blow landed. Karen used her position on the HOA board to pass her package rerouting policy officially. Effective immediately, all deliveries would be redirected to the clubhouse. I received a notice from the carrier that my latest order, printer ink and some cables, had been signed for by the HOA. Signed for by Karen. That night, I stood at my window, sipping coffee, and watched her parade across the street with a stack of packages tucked under her arm. She wasn't even pretending to hide it anymore. She had moved from theft to open monopoly. And in that moment I realized something. Catching her wasn't enough. Glitter and shrimp were child's play. If I wanted to beat Karen at her own game, I had to raise the stakes. And raise them I would. By the time the ink-smudged flyer announcing Karen's new package policy hit every mailbox, the neighborhood had turned into a powder keg. People were divided into camps overnight. Half the cul-de-sac consisted of folks too exhausted to fight back, families with kids, retirees who didn't want conflict, and a few newcomers who believed HOA rules were the equivalent of divine scripture. The other half simmered with rage. Nobody wanted Karen fingering through their Amazon orders like a customs officer at a border crossing. I walked to the mailbox the morning the notice arrived and found Chris already standing there, reading his copy. He waved it like a dirty rag. "Can you believe this? A fee just to pick up my own packages? That's extortion." "Correction," I said. "That's extortion with glitter still stuck in her hair." Chris barked a laugh, but then he leaned in, lowering his voice. "She's going to get away with it unless somebody stops her. People here don't like confrontation. They'll grumble, but they'll pay. You know that." I did know. And Karen knew it too. Her power came from the fact that most people valued peace more than fairness. The trick was to make her rule feel more chaotic than fighting back ever would. That was the seed of my next plan. The first test came within 2 days. I had ordered something deliberately small and boring, a multipack of socks. I wanted to see what Karen would do with something that carried zero resale value and minimal curiosity. When the delivery truck pulled up, I tracked the driver straight to the HOA office. Sure enough, later that evening I received the official email. "Your package is ready for collection. Administrative fee $5." I nearly laughed myself off my chair. $5, just to claim socks I'd already paid for. I forwarded the email to Chris, who texted back, "This is a shakedown." Instead of picking up the socks, I waited. I let the package sit there for 3 days, just to see what Karen's hunger for control would do. On the 4th day, I visited the HOA office. Karen sat behind the desk, hair pulled back so tight it could have polished glass, still faintly glittery if you caught the light right. "I'm here for my package," I said. She slid a clipboard across the counter. "Sign and pay." "Can I see it first?" I asked, just to annoy her. Her lips pursed like she'd bitten a lemon, but she turned and retrieved the box. When she set it down, the tape was clearly tampered with. She must have tried to reseal it, but the flaps sagged. She wanted me to think it had been untouched. "Funny," I said, tapping the box. "Looks like it's already been opened." Karen's nostrils flared. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Not at all. Just admiring your tape job. Did you use kindergarten glue sticks this time?" Her face tightened. She wanted to explode, but she had to keep her composure. That was her weakness. Appearances. She needed to look authoritative, professional, untouchable. She couldn't risk losing it in front of a resident, especially one who might complain to the board. I signed, paid the absurd $5, and walked out with the box. When I got home, I confirmed what I already suspected. The socks were missing. Instead, the box contained one single, rolled-up pair of neon pink leggings. Not my size. Not my order. A swap, bold and mocking. That night, I reviewed my footage again. This time, I set the cameras to track across the street as well. At 2 in the morning, I caught Karen walking out of the HOA office with 2 bags of reallocated packages, as I had started calling them. She moved them into her garage with the confidence of someone rearranging groceries. The evidence kept piling up, but evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed theater. The twist arrived in the form of a neighborhood barbecue. Karen announced it in one of her blast emails. "Community potluck, mandatory attendance for all residents. Celebrate our safe, package-protected neighborhood." I nearly choked on my coffee. Mandatory attendance? For a barbecue? She really thought she was queen. But the barbecue gave me an idea. Public spectacle was Karen's oxygen. If I pulled the right stunt at her stage-managed event, I could choke her with it. The day of the barbecue, Chris and I loaded my cooler with burgers, sodas, and a little something extra. A box. Wrapped in brown paper, clearly shaped like a delivery package, with my name printed across the top in giant letters. I placed it in the middle of the picnic table, right next to the potato salad. As neighbors arrived, Karen swooped around like a hostess at a wedding. Her fake smile never cracked, even when people whispered about her ridiculous package policy. I sat back, beer in hand, pretending to be oblivious. I didn't have to wait long. Karen spotted the box, homed in on it like a hawk. "Oh," she said, loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "Looks like someone received a delivery. Those should really be routed through the office, you know. For safety." I raised an eyebrow. "It's my box, Karen. At a barbecue. Are you seriously going to regulate hot dogs now?" The laughter from nearby neighbors was small but dangerous. Karen felt it. Her face tightened. She picked up the box. "Just for demonstration purposes," she announced. She pried it open. Inside was glitter. Again. But this time mixed with flour. A white and rainbow explosion mushroomed into the summer air, coating her face, her dress, even her hamburger bun. People gasped, then burst out laughing. Someone actually clapped. Karen froze, paralyzed between rage and shame. She dropped the box, coughing flour dust, glitter shimmering under the sun like confetti at her own personal funeral. Chris leaned over to me and whispered, "You just killed the queen." But Karen wasn't dead. Not yet. That night, she struck back. A letter slid under my door, unsigned but unmistakably hers. "You are in violation of HOA bylaws regarding conduct unbecoming of a resident. Disciplinary action will follow." The wording was vague, but the threat was clear. She couldn't fight me with humor, so she'd fight me with bureaucracy. And in that realm, she held the keys. I spent the next day digging. I pored through HOA bylaws, cross-referencing them with state statute. The deeper I went, the more absurd it became. Half the bylaws were unenforceable, poorly written, or blatantly contradictory. One even required all residents to maintain shrubbery no taller than 4 feet, yet Karen's front hedges reached 6. I made a list. Every infraction she had personally committed. Every rule she bent. Every line she had crossed. The list grew longer than I expected. Karen had built her empire on intimidation, not legality. But I needed more than paperwork. I needed witnesses. I quietly approached neighbors, some reluctant, some gleeful, who had lost packages or been bullied by Karen's rules. I gathered stories, evidence, photos. Slowly, the neighborhood whispered network turned into a file of testimonies. The final straw came from an unlikely source. Mr. Patterson, a retired veteran who lived across the street, stopped me while I watered my lawn. "Son," he said, his voice gravelly, "I've had 3 VA deliveries go missing this month. Medication. Important stuff." I didn't say anything because I didn't want trouble. But I saw her taking them. Clear as day. That was it. This wasn't about socks or glitter anymore. Karen was tampering with medical supplies. That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The HOA clubhouse always smelled like burnt coffee and paranoia, but that night it felt like a courthouse. Karen had called a special disciplinary hearing to address my so-called misconduct at the barbecue. The irony of being charged for humiliating her in public when she had literally humiliated herself was almost poetic. Almost. I walked in with my folder tucked under my arm, thick with printed emails, still frames from my cameras, and a neatly typed list of bylaws. Chris came with me for moral support, claiming he wanted to watch Rome burn. Most of the board members were already seated, 3 retirees and 1 overzealous realtor who treated HOA meetings like auditions for city council. Karen presided at the head of the table, draped in a navy blazer that screamed serious business, if you ignored the faint twinkle of glitter still embedded in her hairline. She cleared her throat and launched into her monologue. "We are here to address a resident's repeated violations of community decorum. He has engaged in acts of public disruption, set dangerous traps on his property, and undermined the authority of this board. Such behavior threatens the harmony we work so hard to maintain." Her words rolled out polished and rehearsed, but her eyes flicked nervously toward me. She wanted control, but she feared what I was holding in my folder. I let her finish before I leaned forward. "Are we done with the theater? Because if this is a trial, I'd like to enter evidence." Karen stiffened. "This is not a trial. This is a disciplinary hearing. Then consider this a presentation." I slid the first photo across the table. A still frame of Karen at 3 a.m., ripping open the glitter shrimp box. The retirees squinted, one of them pulling out glasses. Murmurs rippled. I slid another, Karen sneaking packages into her garage. Another, my open sock box with leggings stuffed inside. Karen flushed scarlet. "This is taken out of context. He's manipulating." "Context." I cut in. "Sure. Let's add context." I pulled out the list of bylaws. According to Section 4, Subsection B, shrubbery must remain under 4 feet. Your hedges are 6. Section 7 states no resident may use the HOA office for personal storage. Yet here you are. I dropped the testimonies next, each signed by neighbors who had lost packages. Finally, I held up the crown jewel. A letter from Mr. Patterson detailing his missing VA deliveries. The room went silent. One of the retirees coughed. "That's a federal matter." Exactly. The kind of phrase that makes even power-drunk HOAs sweat. Karen scrambled. "This is slander. He's fabricating all of it. None of this." But the realtor interrupted, sensing political blood. "Karen, is there any truth to these claims?" Her mouth opened, closed, then twisted into something feral. "This is a smear campaign. He set me up. He planted those boxes, doctored that footage, turned the neighbors against me. You're all falling for it." The retirees exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't want to pick sides, but the seed of doubt was planted. That was enough for me. I stood. If you think this is just neighborhood drama, fine. But tampering with federal mail isn't drama. It's a crime. I'm giving this file to the authorities tomorrow. Do what you want with your little bylaw circus. I'm done playing. With that, I left. Chris followed, grinning like a man leaving a fireworks show. You just dropped a nuke in there. But I wasn't celebrating. Because I knew Karen. Cornered animals don't surrender, they bite. The first bite came the very next day. My car windshield was smashed. Not subtle, not clever. Just raw rage. I reported it, but without proof, the police shrugged. Insurance covered the repairs, but the message was clear. Karen wasn't afraid to escalate. That night, I reinforced my cameras, double-checked every lock, and braced for more. It came faster than expected. 2 days later, I woke to find an official notice taped to my door. Pending eviction for repeated violations of community standards. Eviction. She was actually trying to expel me from my own house. Chris nearly choked when I showed him. She doesn't even have that authority. She doesn't care, I said. Authorities never stopped her. Intimidation has always worked. She thinks if she pushes hard enough, I'll fold. Instead, I went nuclear. I took the entire file, not just to the police, but to the postal inspector's office. When I handed over the evidence, the inspector's eyes lit up like I'd just given him Christmas. Mail theft, especially involving VA medication, wasn't a slap-on-the-wrist crime. It was federal. Word spread fast. Within a week, a plain sedan parked discreetly near the HOA office. Agents. They watched, they waited. And Karen, oblivious, kept hoarding packages like a dragon with a suburban treasure trove. The climax came one afternoon when a delivery truck dropped off 3 boxes outside the clubhouse. Karen swooped in minutes later, dragging them inside. The agents followed. The entire neighborhood watched from porches and windows as Karen emerged in handcuffs, screaming about conspiracies and doctored videos, her voice echoing down the cul-de-sac. Some neighbors gasped, others cheered quietly. Chris recorded the whole thing on his phone. Glitter still clung to Karen's clothes as the agents loaded her into the car, like poetic evidence of her downfall. But the story didn't end there. The HOA scrambled. With Karen gone, the board fractured. The realtor tried to seize control, but residents, emboldened by her arrest, pushed back hard. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Old grievances bubbled up. People who had stayed silent suddenly found their voices. Amid the chaos, I stayed calm. I didn't need to lead the revolution. I just needed to ensure Karen's empire crumbled beyond repair. So I kept feeding documents, testimonies, and bylaws into the system until the HOA board finally collapsed under its own weight. In the end, the subdivision voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. No more arbitrary fees, no more fake rules, no more self-appointed queen lording over package deliveries. The neighborhood was free. One quiet evening, weeks later, I sat on my porch, sipping a beer while a new delivery box sat untouched by my door. No glitter, no shrimp, no games. Just peace. Chris wandered over, hands in his pockets. So what's next? You gonna miss the drama? I smirked. Drama's like glitter. Even when you think it's gone, it sticks around forever. But me? I think I'll stick to socks. And for the first time in months, I laughed without restraint. But deep down, I knew one thing. Karen wasn't finished. People like her never are. Somewhere, somehow, she was plotting. And if she ever crawled back, I'd be ready. Because I'd learned something crucial. The best revenge isn't glitter bombs or shrimp trap. It's patience. And patience, unlike packages, can't be stolen. When Karen was hauled off in handcuffs, I thought that was the end. Federal charges, screaming neighbors, glitter still woven through her hair like a scarlet letter. How could she possibly come back from that? But if I've learned anything, it's that people like Karen don't dissolve quietly. They metastasize. The first sign came 2 weeks later, in the form of a letter stuffed into every mailbox. Not an official HOA notice. Those were dead and buried, but a glossy, self-printed newsletter titled, The Neighborhood Beacon. Right at the top, in bold block letters, Special Report, the truth about my arrest. Below it, Karen's smiling face, airbrushed to a porcelain shine, looking like she was running for city council instead of awaiting trial for mail theft. I unfolded it on my kitchen counter and started reading. It was a masterclass in spin. According to Karen, she hadn't been arrested for stealing mail at all. No, she had been framed. She claimed she was the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a resident with a vendetta, complete with digitally altered videos and false testimonies coerced from frightened neighbors. She painted herself as a whistleblower who had been targeted for exposing corruption within the HOA. Chris read over my shoulder and laughed so hard he almost choked on his coffee. She's rebranding herself as a martyr. She's rebranding herself as me, I muttered, because tucked into the middle of the newsletter was a paragraph that made my jaw clench. It described me, without naming me, as a tech-savvy agitator who had a history of harassment and deceit. The kicker: she accused me of stealing my own neighbor's packages to make her look guilty. It would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. Karen wasn't trying to convince me. She was trying to convince the people too timid to confront her. And judging by the nervous looks I started getting from a few neighbors, her propaganda was working. The second sign came in the form of activity at her house. Despite facing charges, Karen was back, on bail, obviously, and holding gatherings in her garage. Cars lined the street some nights, and muffled voices drifted out. She was building something, not the HOA, but a cult of loyalists. People who either believed her story or who craved the order she once provided, no matter how tyrannical. I needed to know what she was planning, so I went full reconnaissance. One night, Chris and I parked across the street in his beat-up pickup, pretending to tinker with the engine while my directional mic pointed at Karen's open garage window. What we heard chilled me. Karen was rallying her supporters. The HOA may be dissolved, but the neighborhood still needs leadership. We can't let chaos take over. We need rules, we need discipline, and we need to protect ourselves from those who wish to divide us. One neighbor asked about her arrest. Karen didn't flinch. Bogus charges. They'll be dropped. And when they are, I'll prove who the real criminal is. I didn't need a name. I could feel every finger in that garage pointing at me. That night, I realized the battle wasn't over. It had only evolved. Karen wasn't queen of the HOA anymore. She was queen of the narrative. The next escalation arrived wrapped in plastic. A package on my porch. Addressed to me, but with no return label. My stomach knotted instantly. I scanned it for tampering before even touching it. When I finally slid it open, I found a pile of shredded glitter-covered paper, soaked in something that smelled suspiciously like shrimp juice. A calling card. Chris suggested burning it, but I decided differently. I documented it. Photos, video, everything cataloged into a new folder. Karen 2.0. Meanwhile, the court date loomed. I wasn't directly involved, but neighbors were subpoenaed to testify. Karen used the delay to her advantage, holding more meetings, dropping more newsletters, planting rumors like landmines. Some of the quieter residents started avoiding me, their smiles tighter, their conversations shorter. It was working. So I fought fire with spectacle. If Karen wanted propaganda, I'd give her performance art. The opportunity came during the annual neighborhood garage sale, an event that survived the HOA's collapse because people liked the bargains too much to let Karen ruin it. I set up my table with old electronics and books. But front and center, I placed a television hooked up to a loop of footage. Karen stealing packages, opening boxes, stuffing them into her car. No commentary, no narration. Just raw, undeniable video on repeat. People stopped. They watched. They whispered. Some laughed nervously, others gasped. Karen herself arrived an hour in, striding across the lawn in oversized sunglasses, jaw tight. She demanded I turn it off. I didn't even look up. Public property, public evidence. You don't like it, don't watch. Her voice cracked as she shrieked, "This is defamation." I kept my eyes on the TV. Funny. I thought you said it was doctored. If it's fake, why does it look exactly like you? The crowd around us went pin-drop silent. Karen stormed off, but the damage was done. Her supporters looked uneasy. Doubt was creeping back in. That night, another letter appeared under my door. This one wasn't vague. "If you don't stop, I'll make sure you regret ever moving here. You don't know who you're dealing with." I read it twice, then slid it into the folder. Each threat was another nail in her coffin. But Karen wasn't finished escalating. The real twist came a week later, when I discovered she'd started her own security patrol. A group of her loyalists, reflective vests and walkie-talkies, marching the neighborhood at night like we were living in some suburban police state. They claimed to be protecting deliveries and maintaining order. What they were really doing was intimidation, hovering near my driveway, shining flashlights into my windows, jotting notes on clipboards like I was under surveillance. Chris confronted one of them, but the guy just smirked. "Karen says we need to keep an eye on troublemakers." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. Karen was building an army. I debated my options. More glitter bombs? Too small time now. Legal action? Already in motion, but slow. What I needed was leverage strong enough to shatter her cult. Something undeniable. Then fate handed it to me. One of the patrol members, a jittery teenager who clearly signed up more for the walkie-talkie than the cause, slipped me a flash drive one evening. "Don't tell her I gave you this," he whispered before darting off. I plugged it in. Inside were audio recordings, Karen ranting to her patrol about her plans. She wasn't just rebuilding the HOA in secret, she was planning to reinstate dues, impose curfews, and even ban troublemakers from the community. My name came up repeatedly. It was gold. The next step was obvious. I didn't just need to expose Karen. I needed to expose her live, in front of the very people she was trying to control. So I hatched a plan. The fall neighborhood block party was coming up, a rare event everyone attended. Karen would be there, trying to spin her martyrdom one last time. That was where I'd drop the bomb. As I sat on my porch the night before, reviewing the recordings, I couldn't help but smile. Karen thought she was orchestrating a comeback. She had no idea she'd already handed me the rope I needed to hang her ambitions forever. And this time there would be no glitter. Just the cold, sharp weight of her own words. The morning of the block party felt like the calm before a storm. Kids pedaled bikes draped in streamers, grills smoked in driveways, and folding tables sagged under potato salad and soda cans. But beneath the surface cheer, I could feel it, the tension of a neighborhood split down the middle. Half the people here wanted peace at any cost, the other half wanted Karen gone for good, and everyone else was just waiting to see which way the wind blew. I'd spent the night preparing. The recordings were loaded onto a thumb drive, the thumb drive connected to a speaker system I borrowed from Chris, and the system tucked discreetly behind the cooler of beers at my table. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. Karen didn't disappoint. She arrived dressed like she was hosting a campaign rally. White blazer, oversized sunglasses, a patriotic scarf fluttering around her neck. Her loyalists flanked her, wearing their ridiculous reflective vests like they were Secret Service. She strolled between tables, shaking hands, handing out fresh copies of her Neighborhood Beacon newsletter. I pretended not to watch, sipping my drink, but my eyes never left her. When she reached the center of the cul-de-sac, she cleared her throat dramatically, drawing the crowd. "Neighbors," she began, her voice smooth, practiced, dripping with faux sincerity. "I want to thank you all for standing with me through these difficult weeks. Lies have been spread. Videos have been faked. But truth, as it always does, will prevail." Some people clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. I could see doubt still clouding the air, but she was skilled, too skilled. If I let her spin long enough, she might win back enough of them to rebuild her throne. So I acted. I clicked play. At first, it was faint. Her voice crackling through the speaker. We will rebuild stronger. Curfews, dues, strict enforcement. No more packages slipping through the cracks. And the agitators? People like him. Heads swiveled. The crowd stilled. Karen froze mid-sentence, eyes widening as her own words filled the cul-de-sac. They'll regret ever moving here. I'll make sure they're forced out. This is our community, and we'll take it back by any means necessary. The gasp that rippled through the crowd was almost physical. Parents pulled their kids closer. Neighbors glanced at each other, horror dawning. Even some of her loyalists shifted nervously, realizing they were being dragged into something far uglier than neighborhood watch. Karen's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. That's fake. It's doctored. He's twisting my words. I stood slowly, calm as ever. Funny. If it's fake, why do I have hours of it? Multiple nights, multiple meetings. Why does your voice keep threatening me and half this neighborhood? I held up the thumb drive between two fingers. This isn't glitter, Karen. This is proof. She lunged toward me, desperation replacing dignity. Give me that, she screeched, but Chris stepped between us, holding her back with one hand like she was a yapping dog. The crowd erupted. Some shouted at her, some at me, but the tide had turned. For the first time, the whispers weren't doubting me. They were condemning her. I saw neighbors I barely knew standing taller, voices louder, no longer afraid. Then came the final twist. A pair of unmarked cars rolled up, and two federal agents stepped out. Not local police this time. Postal inspectors. Their timing couldn't have been better if I'd scripted it. One held up a badge. Karen Whitmore? The crowd parted. Karen's face crumpled. This is harassment. But her protests drowned in the click of handcuff. The agents read her rights while the neighborhood watched, stunned. Kids peeked over parents' shoulders. Someone recorded the whole thing on their phone. Karen was led to the car, her reflective vest loyalists scattering like cockroaches. The cul-de-sac, once her kingdom, had turned into an amphitheater of judgment. She screamed about conspiracies until the door slammed shut. Then the car pulled away, and silence settled heavy and strange. Chris let out a long whistle. Well, that was final. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Not until I was sure. The next week, the news spread. Karen had been officially charged with multiple counts of mail theft, tampering, and obstruction. The recordings I provided sealed the case. She wasn't going to talk her way out this time. The neighborhood felt different after that. Lighter, freer. Without the HOA, people painted their mailboxes whatever color they wanted. Kids left scooters on sidewalks without fines. Packages piled safely on porches. For the first time in years, people actually waved at each other without the shadow of Karen hovering over their shoulders. One evening, I sat on my porch with Chris, both of us nursing beers, watching the sunset burn across the cul-de-sac. A new neighbor waved as she carried groceries, no fear in her eyes about being ticketed for having the wrong brand of lawn gnome. You realize, Chris said, you're basically a legend now. The guy who glitter-bombed the HOA president and toppled her empire. I chuckled. Not exactly the legacy I was aiming for. But I'll take it. He grinned. What are you gonna do if she comes back? I thought about it. About Karen sitting in a cell, plotting, fuming, sharpening her tongue like a blade. People like her didn't disappear. They resurfaced. They always resurfaced. If she comes back, I said, I'll be ready. Because now the neighborhood knows what she really is. And once you see glitter, you can't unsee it. Chris laughed so hard he nearly spilled his beer. Weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from Karen, but from the postal inspector. A formal thank you for my cooperation. They mentioned restitution might even be available for the neighbors she'd stolen from. I folded it, slipped it into the folder I still kept labeled Karen. The folder was thick now, a scrapbook of absurdity, rage, and glitter. Part of me considered burning it, letting go. But another part knew better. Karen was gone, but the story wasn't. Stories like hers never really end. That night, as I turned off the porch light and went inside, I glanced at the newest package waiting by my door. A box of printer ink. Boring, ordinary, untouched. And I realized that was the real victory. Not the spectacle, not the glitter, not even Karen's downfall. The victory was normalcy. The right to live in peace, free from a tyrant who thought power was her birthright. Still, as I locked the door, I couldn't help but smirk. If Karen ever tried to rise again, she wouldn't just face me. She'd face a neighborhood that had finally learned how to fight back. And this time, no amount of newsletters or scarves or glitter in her hair would save her.